This is the word of the Lord of hosts. I took you from the pastures and from following the sheep to be prince over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone and have destroyed all the enemies in your path. I will make you a great name among the great ones of the earth. I will assign a place for my people in Israel. There I will plant them, and they shall dwell in their own land.
Samuel 6 and 7 are going to be fairly central starting points for understanding 2 Samuel as a book. The book has this arching pattern, beginning with the rise of David's rule, the rise of his establishment of God's presence at Jerusalem on the cosmic mountain, but then this descent of David into this precarious position of sin and fleeing from Jerusalem and putting those promises to a test, those divine promises to a test. So what we have in 2 Samuel is going to be a wrestling with this theological question of how can God's firm reality, with all of its otherness, actually work within human frailty, human mortality, human sin. It all begins in 2 Samuel 6 with the presence of this ark, and it's already made clear in 2 Samuel 6 that the ark has both this power to harm. So when Uzzah touches it at the beginning of the chapter, he dies because it's like messing around with a high voltage generator. But yet when the ark is stored in the house of David's bodyguard near Jerusalem, it brings blessing and bounty and great peace and success to the house. David is not just doing a politically astute action, creating this new worship center and political center in Jerusalem. This is about God's cosmic reign, God's cosmic prerogative being established in chapter 6. And then in chapter 7, it's about the Davidic line being established with this blessing where David and his progeny become a dynasty and they become vicars of God, bearing all of this promise of God's blessing and God's bringing the kingdom through an incarnate figure of God, a sacral king. These things have to be held together. There's no separating the terrestrial locus of God's coming reign, symbolized by the territory of Zion, and God's work through a incarnate representative, a sacral king. These elements are both present in both 2 Samuel 6 and 2 Samuel 7. And between them, those two chapters lay the groundwork for the book of 2 Samuel as a whole, which begins with the rise of David, the rise of Jerusalem, this arcing ascent, which establishes God's will and God's ability to push in holiness and cosmic power into earth. But then as the book of 2 Samuel continues, this decline or descent of David, where he has to wrestle with his own sinfulness, frailty, and mortality. And the question gets asked as to whether a divine promise of cosmic dimension can actually work itself out within sinful human history. The problem, the descent into questioning and worry about the eternal promises is already begun in 2 Samuel when David's first wife, Saul's daughter, Michal, still holding up her father as a better king than David. David has made a fool of himself, dancing half naked before the ark. The text makes clear that David does not have sex with her after that. There's no possibility for the Saul line and the David line to create an heir that will be copacetic for both Saul's supporters and David's supporters. So already there is hints that not everyone is going to be happy with David having his own line of kings, not associated with Saul, coming out from him. And that this anticipates the problems that he's going to have with Adonijah trying to take over the kingship, the problems that he's going to have even earlier with Absalom trying to take over the kingship and attacking David. So these problems are already hinted at in this chapter. It is interesting that Saul's daughter Michal, David's first wife's rebuke of David, centers around the fact that he's kind of made a fool of himself in her eyes by dancing naked as the ark processes in. And you can really see in the clip of David's procession that opened this video that David has a very, very lively, ecstatic worship experience before God here. And he throws aside pragmatic, Machiavellian concerns about how he will be able to look to his subjects as a king ruling with dignity. He humbles himself in God's sight and really throws himself emotionally and spiritually into relationship with God. This is unusual in the ancient Near East. We have references to dancing in worship in the Psalms and in extra-biblical culture. We even have references in the ancient Near East to a queen dancing as part of worship. We don't have any references besides this to the monarch, the king, dancing half naked in public. Another sign that part of David's strength and the fact that there's this tremendous love between David and God is that David is willing to push aside propriety, push aside socialization, push aside royal expectations. It's more important to David to celebrate this ideal of the king as having this incredibly intimate relationship with God as God's own son, before whom he can dance half naked.